Hello beautiful people, welcome to my video. This is gonna be a part 1 video where I'm showing how I did Hobie from Rapunzel. Well, I basically use air dry clay and some sculpting tools. For the people who doesn't know about me, I'm a full-time artist and I studied fine arts where I was doing lots of painting, design, sculpture, mosaic, pottery and all. But I choose to focus on painting and drawing for my career, and sculpture was something that I always enjoy. With the recent inspirations I got after more than maybe 10 years, I wanted to give a shot. Here we go. I may have missed showing some steps in the video because I only thought about recording the process after I had already started. So if you cannot see every single part, I will be explaining what I did. First, I took a big piece of clay and I rolled it in my hands to create the body shape. Then I placed a stick inside to support it. After that, I made the head by rolling another piece of clay into a ball and attached on the top of the body. The reason I use a stick inside is to prevent the body from collapsing later. It works like an internal skeleton or structure. Some artists usually start their sculpture by building the skeleton first, and honestly that is probably the more correct approach, but I was a bit impatient and started shaping the clay directly. Since I know this material well and I felt confident controlling it, I decided to take the risk. The tools I use are usually spoon-shaped tools because they help me both press and spread the clay at the same time. I also use a small amount of water so air dry clay doesn't stick too much to my hand. If you use too much water, the clay becomes overly soft and much harder to control. Some artists actually prefer letting the clay sit outside for a while so it becomes slightly firmer before working with it. Mine was still very soft and sticky, so I used a little bit water while sculpting. Sometimes I used it on my fingers to smooth the surface while shaping, and sometimes after attaching the pieces together to blend and soften the connections area. While explaining these steps, what I'm basically doing is straightening the connections between the head and the body. I take extra pieces of clay and place them around the joining points, then press and blend them into completely so two parts of clay attach securely. You will notice me doing this whenever I add an extra piece to the sculpture. I usually support it with smaller pieces of clay around the connection area you will be noticing, and you can think of them almost like clay tape. I place them around the joint and then smudge and press them so everything becomes one solid form. Another thing I do is attach some pieces slightly larger than their final size. In certain areas, adding small clay tape support pieces would be difficult, so instead I place one larger piece first, then I smudge and blend the edges of the piece into the sculpture so it works almost like built-in support. This helps the entire piece attach more securely and become fully integrated with the form instead of just sitting on the surface. I hope you understand. While working on this sculpture, I always kept reference photos of Hobie from Barbie as Rapunzel open in front of me, so I constantly see different angles of the bunny while sculpting. My goal was not to copy Hobie exactly, but to make sure the sculpture still clearly reminds us of him. At the same time, I also wanted to add some of my own artistic interpretation. I wanted my version to feel slightly maybe more realistic and emotional in terms of body language and posture, which is why you will see me experimenting with the pose through the process. The narration and the video footage maybe not always perfectly match step by step since I started recording later and I'm always giving some kind of information during the process, but I'm sure you will still understand the main idea behind everything. If you want to get into sculpting, I honestly think it helps a lot to first understand drawing and basic anatomy. Artists who understand human anatomy usually adapt much more easily to sculpting animals or stylized creatures as well. You don't have to know extremely, you don't need to be advanced in anatomy knowledge, but understanding the basic of structure, movement and form makes a huge difference. It helps you understand how the body connects, balances and flows. So if you feel intimidated by sculpture at first, my biggest recommendation is to practice drawing as much as possible, especially anatomy studies. It will improve both your confidence and your understanding of form. Right now what you're seeing is me trying to keep the ears from collapsing, and to make shaping them easier, I'm adding small support rods inside them. You can use wood, plastic, metal, or really anything similar you can find at home. I found a metal rod and I cut it into two small pieces and I use them inside the ears. Normally these supports are connected to the main armature inside the head and the torso from the very beginning. Many artists build the full skeleton structure first, which is definitely the cleaner approach. My process is a bit more improvised and complicated because I'm adding supports later during the sculpting. And you don't always need to build the entire armature first. Sometimes you can develop the sculpture gradually through the process, like you think like it's almost catching. Moving fast forward, I think the most challenging part of the sculpture was definitely the arm. Keeping the arms in the exact pose I wanted became a little difficult. This is honestly the struggle of an impatient artist like me who just wants to jump directly into sculpting as fast as possible. But in the end, it still worked. For the arms, I scratched both the surface where I was attaching the piece and the piece itself. Think of it almost like a Lego system. The texture helps the clay grip and attach more securely to each other. I first sculpted the upper arm and shoulder area close to the body, and I used a lot of extra clay around the connection points to secure them properly. After that, I added small rods inside the lower arm so they could hold their shape and support the hand gesture I wanted. After attaching both arms in the position I wanted and adding the rod support inside, I used a brush with a small amount of water to carefully blend all the connection points so they would hold securely later. This step also helped me to shape the arms better since I added a lot of supporting clay between the arms and the body. Using the brush almost like a painting allowed me to smooth and blend everything together naturally. It helped me bring out the final body and arm shape while also making the extra support clay much less visible. Well, the legs. My phone battery died at this point, so I couldn't fully record the beginning of this step, but what I did was take one large thick piece of clay and I bent it into a wide U shape. Since the upper torso was already finished, this became the foundation for building the lower body. I placed the torso on the top of the U-shaped piece and then I started to smudge and blend the edges together. This gave me a very strong and stable base for shaping the hips, legs, and the overall lower body. When the sculpture was almost finished, I placed it on a piece of cardboard, which also became the surface where it would dry. Air dry clay separates easily from cardboard later, so it made the process practical and easier to manage. It also helped me to rotate the sculpture more comfortably while doing the final touch-ups. Normally, some artists use a sculpting turntable or pottery wheel for this, which makes the process much easier, and it's not difficult to find actually. You may have noticed it at the beginning of the video, but for the tail, I also use a small stick piece as a support. I placed a ball of clay over it, then smudge and blend the edges smoothly into the sculpture, and with that, the tail was finished too. And finally, the sculpture was finished and looked like this. I let it dry for a full day, but when I checked it in the next morning, some cracks had appeared and it was still slightly damp. If this happens, there is no need to panic. I simply took a small piece of clay and I patched the cracked areas the same way I was working with the clay while it was still wet. I added more clay into the openings, then smudged and blended everything smoothly together. After that, I let it dry for another full day. Once it was completely dry, I placed it on the top of a tape roll with an empty center so air could reach the bottom as well. This helps the underside dry much faster. You can also place it on the top of a glass or a bowl. The important thing is to leave space underneath so air can flow through and dry the sculpture evenly. Thank you so much for watching until the end. This was such a sudden but beautiful decision for me, and honestly, I had so much fun for creating something like that I didn't do for a very long time. Part 2 will be much shorter. I will be showing you simply how I painted, and I'm gonna explain the material I use for the fur detail. I would be so happy if you can support my channel and follow me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Take care and see you soon. Peace and love.